Another top free agent bat is off the board as the Toronto Blue Jays have signed Anthony Santander. What does this mean for Pete Alonso? Are the Blue Jays no longer a landing spot for him? This takes another plan B off the board for the Mets. What does this mean for a potential reunion? I'll cover it all on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, Anthony Santander is a Toronto Blue Jay. And if you read my free agent predictions article at the beginning of the offseason, I told you first. I said that the Blue Jays were going to sign Anthony Santander, but my prediction is pretty off when you talk about dollar amount. And this just shows you the state of the market right now. I, like many others, thought Santander would clear $100 million. I expect him to make $110 million, and he still can, but only through a very intricate contract where he gets an opt-out after the third year, and then the Jays can opt in to a sixth year. But this contract has heavy deferrals. So what is he guaranteed? He's guaranteed $92.5 million, which comes out to an average annual value of about $18.5 million. But the reports are the deferrals in this contract will take that AAV down to about $14 million per season. So in present day value, this really is a 5-year, $70 million deal. Now, I'm going to talk about the implications of that on the Blue Jays and whether they have room financially for Pete Alonso in the next segment. But let's just look at this from a Mets perspective and the contract they put forth to their, not a 40 home run hitter last year, but historically a 40 home run hitter in Pete Alonso. They were offering him somewhere between 22 and maybe $24 million. Let's call it 3 years, $69 million right in the middle. If that really was the contract offer, $23 million per season compared to Santander, who just hit 44 home runs and is getting $14 million per season when you factor in deferrals. It makes that Mets contract look that much more fair when it comes to market value. Now you could say, man, what a steal. Why didn't the Mets sign Anthony Santander if this was the price? And you could say, well, they really are cash strapped. I did that show over the weekend. Are the Mets bluffing, or is there really a budget? Did the money that was going to go to Pete Alonso really go to Jesse Winker and AJ Minter? Well, look, you could have taken Jesse Winker's money times it by 2 when it comes to present day value and got Anthony Santander. But I think if you're thinking about the long-term vision of this franchise, they don't want to give up comp picks and international bonus pool money for Anthony Santander. They are thinking about their future in that way. And maybe they still think that, I don't know, a big bat's going to return. Or they are just so comfortable with the idea of Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, and Luis Angel Acuna at this point that they've talked themselves into it. It's one of the two. And we'll get to that stuff more in the final segment today. But I want to get it back to the Blue Jays here and whether they are still in on Pete Alonso. Now, a report came out that they still are. That they still are in the mix to add another bat. But let's talk about roster fit right now. Let's just say that they decide to give Alonso a 5-year deal like they just gave to Santander. And they want to extend Vladdy. Well, now you're locking up 3 guys who aren't great with their glove. And you only have 1 DH spot. So that's not likely. Now, could it be a 3-year deal with those opt-outs? Potentially. Potentially. What does that do for them in 2025? Well, they can do a couple things. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would reportedly be more than willing to move back over to third base because it's probably going to help his value when he goes into free agency. But he's not a good defensive third baseman. And they have a third baseman currently if they want to stick with him. Ernie Clement, who played the position last year very well defensively, didn't have the best offensive season, but he hit 12 home runs and had 12 stolen bases. There might be a little bit more there. He's an option at third base. They have Will Wagner, who was maybe going to be their opening day second baseman until they traded for Andres Jimenez. Wagner, he can potentially move over to third. He had a really good short sample size last year, and that is, by the way, Billy Wagner's son. So he's an option. They also have David Schneider, a guy who had a really good 2023 season, but last year in a full sample size, not as good. They have some young talent that they might want to fill into these spots. The guys that are locked in, they got George Springer in right. Dalton Varsho is coming off shoulder surgery, but he'll be ready at some point this year. He's their center fielder. In left now, they got Santander unless he's DHing. And then they could move a Wagner or a Schneider, whoever wins that job in the left if they wanted to. In the infield, they got Guerrero at first, Andres Jimenez at second, Bo Bichette at short, and then again, third base, a little bit of a question mark. So either they had to fill third base or DH. And Pete Alonso theoretically could make either work because he could either be their DH, Vladdy could be their DH, or Vladdy could move to third, Alonso could play first, and they'd have somebody else DH. If they wanted to, that could be Santander, and they figure out left field in another way. There is still theoretically room for Pete Alonso, but I really wonder how much they have an appetite to spend when they put heavy deferrals in this contract to get this value down to $70 million over 5 years. And more importantly, as we'll get into in this next segment here, to $14 million per season. Because that, to me, speaks of a team that is not just free-flowing with their budget, trying to blow through the tax line, not caring. Actually, I think the Blue Jays are an extremely tax-conscious team. And are they really going to go above and beyond that tax to be the team that gets Pete Alonso, to put the offer in front of Pete that gets him to say, yep, I want to be a Blue Jay, which until Santander signed this contract, and I guess including Jeff Hoffman, who had 2 failed physicals with other teams before he got to signing with the Blue Jays, doesn't seem like many guys are really signing up to go play north of the border. So I want to talk about all of that in the next segment. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Rocket Money is the place to go to cancel your unwanted subscriptions. I know personally, I had subscriptions that I was paying for month after month after month, and I didn't know it. Imagine how frustrating it is to discover that there's money you're just throwing down the drain. But with Rocket Money, you'll have a personal finance app that acts like a personal finance assistant, canceling your unwanted subscriptions, monitoring your spending, and helping you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place. Rocket Money has over 5 million users that have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, again, that best feature was that subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't going to use anymore. I also have used it to help me save, so I don't have to spend as much time thinking about budgeting. It's all there for me with their goals feature, so I can automatically set money aside for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a big favor. Hit that subscribe button. Our next goal is to get to 12,000 subscribers. And the last I checked, we're like 20 subscribers away. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Let's talk about the Blue Jays payroll a little bit. They have been thrown out there all offseason, attached to every big free agent imaginable. They were in on Juan Soto. They recently wanted Tanner Scott. Of course, they got Jeff Hoffman. They signed Anthony Santander. But they've been linked to Pete Alonso, linked to Alex Bregman. At one point in time, they might have been linked to Willy Adames. I know they were linked to Corbin Burns. All of these different free agents that they potentially wanted to add. So that paints an image of them as a big spender. But did you know that since 2015, over the last 10 seasons, the Blue Jays have gone over the luxury tax all of one time? And that was in 2023, coming off a season in 2022 where they made the playoffs, won 92 games, had a core that was clearly in a win now mode. And they did spend. They got Chris Bassett. They made some moves. That might have been the year they brought in Kiermaier, and they got Brandon Belt. I mean, they were spending. When you look at how much they spent over that line, though, I was pretty fascinated to learn that they were about $19 million over the luxury tax line. Now, if you want a full breakdown of the luxury tax, I talked about it over the weekend on a show where I talked about the Mets are bluffing or, again, really, on a budget. And so I really got into the nuances of this, but there are different tax thresholds. Once you clear the first tax threshold, you start to see those more significant penalties. Once you get past $20 million over the luxury tax line, that's when you start to get into some real penalties. If you just go a little bit over, you're only taxed 20% of every dollar you spent over. So for the Blue Jays that year, and about $19 million over, they only paid about $5 million in luxury tax penalties. So when I see a team that year over year over year, and you can look at Spot Track and look at the tax table, every single year, they are right up against luxury tax. They treat the luxury tax like a salary cap. And when they go over it, or when they went over it that one time, they treated that first threshold as another cap to stay under, to not hit that second wave of penalties. And they got right back under the tax the next year to avoid being a repeat offender. So I say all of that. And then we talk about what happened with Santander. If you look at their current tax table, according to Spot Track, it has them at $245 million, just over that. It has them $4.33 million over the tax line, but that is factoring in Anthony Santander's salary without any deferrals. So it has him at a hit of $18.5 million. So now imagine that drops to the $14 million that's been reported. What does that do for the Blue Jays? It knocks them right under that tax line. That is not a coincidence. Now, does this mean that they are against going over it? No. But to go over it and to potentially be a repeat offender when next year you have Bo Bichette on the market, you have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on the market, you might be bidding against multiple teams to keep Vladdy, and that might be the time where you have to go into the tax. If you don't want to be a repeat tax team, you certainly don't want to go over that line. So if they don't sign Vladdy to an extension now, how does that impact what they do from here? Could they just call it an offseason? They got Andres Jimenez to play second base, give them elite platinum glove defense there. He could be their shortstop of the future. If Bo Bichette is not retained, you can just slide Jimenez to short. They got Santander as another bat in the lineup with Vladdy. If Vladdy goes, all right, well, you have Santander around. They are in, and they also got a closer in Jeff Hoffman. But how in are they really for this season? Are they really in a position to blow past the luxury tax? Because if Pete Alonso wants $30 million this season, is he really going to find that deal with the Blue Jays? A team that just went out of their way to defer a ton of money to get Santander down to $14 million and get under that luxury tax line? I just don't know if I see it. Now, they apparently are in talks to extend Vladdy right now. And there was a deadline set by Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s camp. I think it's somewhere in the middle of February. Pretty much get an extension done before spring training or don't get one done at all. There is every chance that they do extend Vladdy. But if they extend Vladdy and they get that signed, are they really ready to double down on the team this year and get Pete Alonso? Or do they feel comfortable knowing their franchise superstars locked up that they just roll with what they got? I think there's a pretty good chance that this might have been the last move for the Blue Jays. Or if they do make other moves, it might be to bolster their bullpen more. Who knows? Maybe Jurickson Profar is a player they can get at a reasonable salary later on in the offseason, and they plug him in somewhere. And maybe he's their left fielder and Santander plays DH, whatever it is. I don't know if they're going to put the offer in front of Pete Alonso that makes him want to play with the Blue Jays. Because that's the thing. Nobody wants to play with the Blue Jays, and it's not because it's a horrible city. It's because, for one, as one of my Locked On Mets insiders pointed out to me in a text, you get taxed more, which I knew you got taxed more, but he gave me a little more details into that. But bottom line, you get taxed more to live in Toronto. Your paycheck is taxed a little bit more. But also, one of the things that I've known about these players is they don't really want to go through customs all the time. You think it might not be a big deal, but it kind of is. Every single road trip, when you're going and when you're coming back, you got to go through customs. It just makes it a little more comfortable. And for Pete Alonso, you think he really wants to go move to Toronto for 3 years? I just don't know if I can see it. He would have to be really in on the Blue Jays, or they'd have to overpay him. And I don't think they're necessarily going to overpay him. They might give him a longer-term deal. But if Pete Alonso at this point wants the short-term deal with the opt-outs, I don't know if the Blue Jays are the place for him. Because I don't know if they're really going to give him more than the Mets did. And if you're Pete Alonso and Scott Boras says, all right, we just got a deal from Toronto. It's 3 for $75 with deferrals to take it down to $68 million. And Pete's going to say, well, isn't that what the Mets are offering us, Scott? Can we see if the Mets offer is still on the table? And then they come back to the Mets and all of a sudden maybe a deal gets done. So I don't know if the Blue Jays really are a landing spot for Pete. You take them out of it. Where is he going? Where is he going? And that's the same conversation we've had about this guy for weeks and at this point months, but it holds true. Is he really going to go to the Angels? They've been floated. They have Nolan Shanwell. Why are they going to move Nolan Shanwell to the outfield? They have their first baseman. They drafted him in the first round. He has shown some makings of being a good big league hitter without pretty much any minor league experience. I think they're going to roll with him. They have Jorge Soler as their DH. Are the Red Sox going to get in on Pete Alonso? They got Casas at first, and Masataka Yoshida is clogging up the DH spot. They can't get rid of him. Are the Tigers really going to all of a sudden be in on Pete? They've been in the conversation with Alex Bregman all offseason. It feels like if they're going to sign one of them, it will be Bregman. The Mariners, perfect fit. Ideally, they need Pete. They're not spending. And then you get to the one team that can maybe get in the mix, and it's the same team that did it last year, the Giants, with Matt Chapman and Blake Snell. But they're probably going to wait it out just like the Mets are. Wait it out and see what happens. And if you're Pete Alonso and you are going to sign one of those opt-out contracts, are you going to go to the place that hasn't seen a 30 home run hitter since Barry Bonds? Is that really where you want to go to prove it? All of this continues to lead into the belief that David Stearns might be playing chess in this situation with Pete Alonso, and it can result at him coming back to the Mets on their terms. I want to talk about the game of chess that Stearns might be playing a little bit to close out the show. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes NFL playoffs even more exciting. Because right now, new customers can bet $5. You're going to get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. So no waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has got you covered. They also have NBA action going on right now, and you can start to look towards your MLB futures. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So let's talk a little bit about where the Mets are at with Pete Alonso. I know we spent a lot of time on this, but it is the story surrounding this team still, despite the Mets' best efforts, because as we look back at what happened last week, it does seem like the Mets had a really set plan in place for how they rolled out this news. Remember, under David Stearns, this franchise has been tight-lipped. They don't let a lot of things get out. Now, Juan Soto, their interest was obvious, and that's just not something you can conceal. But did we hear too much about Frankie Montas before that deal was signed? No. We heard a little bit about Clay Holmes, but not a ton. AJ Minter, that sort of came out of left field. The Mets move in silence now for the most part. They don't have a lot of leaks coming from their side. Scott Boras or agents, they can leak some information. But the Mets themselves don't typically have leaks. What happened when they signed Jesse Winker was a clear leak. There was a message the Mets wanted to get out there. Robert Murray of FanSided, who is a really credible reporter, he was talking on his podcast about Pete Alonso after all that went down. And he said that he's hearing that the Mets are still a fit for Pete Alonso and still are talking to him. Take that for whatever it's worth. If you think about what the leaks accomplished, why did the Mets do that? Why did they come out and say, we think Pete Alonso is going to sign with another team? We're moving on to plan B post Alonso. I think that accomplished three things. The first one, it let it be known that they were serious about their price and they put their price out there. Steve Cohen's not going to cave in and overpay for Pete Alonso. That was the message that was sent to Scott Boras and even potential other teams. But by putting that number out there too, are other teams going to top it? They're daring another team to swoop in and pay more than they put on the table because they don't think there's a team that will put more on the table. They are betting that these other teams who aren't spending this offseason anyway, who might be cautious of the luxury tax like the Blue Jays, who maybe spent a bunch of money already like the Giants, and have a first baseman in place in Lamont Wade with a platoon partner and Wilmer Flores. They don't necessarily need Pete Alonso. They are betting that all these teams are going to process this information and still not be in. And if they are, they might lose them. And with that, it comes to the second thing that they accomplished. They prepared the fan base for the breakup. They ripped the Band-Aid early. And if Pete Alonso ends up signing with San Francisco tomorrow, the fan base isn't going to be happy. I don't think the fan base is going to celebrate it. But we would have come to terms with it because they gave us the warning. We're playing hardball here. Now, they made it seem like, oh, they're ready to move on. But I think it's more a matter of they put themselves in a position to play hardball, to wait it out, to let it get uncomfortable. Because it was getting uncomfortable for the Mets. Every day, it's like, okay, well, when are they just going to sign him? When are they just going to sign him? Come on, Steve Cohen, why don't they just sign him? And by coming out with the report that they did the way they did, we are comfortable with our internal options. Jesse Winker is going to be the DH with Darling Marte. We're going to get a reliever. They land AJ Minter. They're making it seem like they're good. Are they? We'll find out. But it puts all the pressure on Scott Boras and Pete Alonso. Go find another landing spot. Go find another offer. They are calling Scott Boras' bluff that there's other teams in. And ultimately, they're still going to be there at the end of this whole thing. If Alonso cannot literally find another team that wants him to play for them at his asking price or even short of it, the Mets are still there. And if it is short of his asking price, which ultimately I think it will be, I don't think there is a team that's going to put $90 million in front of Pete Alonso with the opt-outs. I just don't think there's that team. Last year, Matt Chapman had to settle for $54 million over 3 years. Pete Alonso waits more and more. That might be the best offer he gets. All of a sudden, you got to come back to the Mets. And that's what the result of this could be. I think there's 3 outcomes. Outcome A, Alonso comes back on their price that was laid out. Something very similar to that. Maybe to give Pete Alonso a little something. They'll do the deferred money thing, juice up the offer a little bit. And when it comes to the average annual value, it'll get brought right back down to maybe even less than what was reported. So they have it out there that's in the $68 to $70 million range. Maybe all of a sudden, Pete Alonso signed the Mets on a 3-year, $80 million deal. But then we learn heavy deferrals. And the present day value is actually closer to, $18 million per season, $17 million per season. Who knows how far they can really manipulate those numbers? But generally, my point is, if that's what they put out there, 3 years, $69, $70 million, getting him at that price or lower. That's outcome one. Outcome two, he finds a suitor somewhere else, and whether it's for the same price or a little bit more, he leaves. And that could be a little bit of spite. That could also be just he gets a better offer. But I think that option is dwindling for him. There's just not a lot of teams that are in the market for Pete. The third option that I could see happening from all this is Pete Alonso signs a 1-year deal with a bigger salary. 1-year deal. No safety net, no pillow. Or if anything, it's a 2-year deal with heavier salary in the first year. So let's just say it's 2 for 50. That's actually more than it's more than the Mets wanted. So I'm not even going to say that. Let's say it's 2 for 40 and it's 25 million in the first year. I don't know. 2 for 45 and it's 25 million in the first year, 20 in the second year. But I really even think it could just be a 1-year deal though, and throw out the pillow. It's like, all right, Pete, you want to get paid 30? We'll give you 26 for 1 year. You get more than the qualifying offer. You get the most of any first baseman that was on the market this year to play in 2025. But it ends up being a 1-year deal, no pillow to fall back on. That's an outcome that I could see. A fourth outcome that I'll throw out there, when you look at how friendly this Anthony Santander contract ended up being, is there a world where the Mets would consider doing something similar for Pete? Where he gets a bloated number on which I've been talking about all offseason, but I still feel like it's a route for the Mets where maybe he does get a 4th year and the numbers get inflated with the deferred money. But ultimately, you're looking at Pete Alonso. Maybe he doesn't get an opt-out after year 1. Maybe it's opt-out after year 2. Maybe he gets the 5-year deal that Santander just got, but all of a sudden, Pete Alonso's on your books for the luxury tax, and he's only costing you like $15 million. Something crazy. That might be the only other thing that could happen here where the Mets give him some length and some security by using the deferrals and all that stuff to their advantage to make him a value on their books. One way or the other, I think Pete Alonso will be a value on the Mets books if he comes back. Whether that's right around the offer that was reported, whether that's a 1-year deal where there's no risk. So yes, it might be more than you particularly want in 2025, but absolutely no risk. And if you want to pursue Vladdy, you want to pursue Josh Naylor, Brett Beatty had a breakout season, or Acuna or Mauricio did, and you're actually good in the infield, whatever it is. You have all of your options and all your flexibility next year. Or he actually gets more years than any of us think he will at this point. But it's at such a low price point when it comes to the luxury tax that he is a value to the New York Mets. I believe David Stearns is playing chess here. And we'll see if the ego of Scott Boras and the ego of Pete Alonso gets in the way of them coming back around and really getting to the negotiation table and ironing out a deal that makes a lot of sense for the New York Mets, but also some sense for Pete. We'll see how it all shakes out, but today's signing of Anthony Santander going to the Blue Jays, it just once again affirmed what we've all been saying throughout this offseason. There is no better landing spot for Pete Alonso than the New York Mets. And to get another bat in the lineup, there is nobody that fits the Mets more than Pete Alonso. Hopefully, at some point, cooler heads will prevail. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of the show. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button to help us get to that next goal of 12,000 subscribers that we are so close to. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. If you want to be a follower of us on social media, you can do so at Locked On Mets for the show. For myself, at Finkelstein Ryan. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.